Bathophobia, the fear of deep water. Hello there, fear explorers, and welcome to today's deep dive into one of humanity's most primal fears. Before we plunge into today's topic, if you're new here and enjoy exploring the psychology behind our fears, consider subscribing to join our community of curious minds. Now let's dive in. Imagine standing at the edge of a boat, looking down into dark blue waters. You can't see the bottom. You have no idea what lies beneath. That vast, mysterious abyss stretching endlessly below you. For many people, this scenario triggers immediate anxiety, racing heartbeats, and even panic attacks. This is bathophobia, the intense fear of deep water. Today, we're going to explore why some of us feel this overwhelming dread when confronted with deep waters, hear real stories from people who live with this fear, and discover effective strategies to overcome it. Whether you're watching because you experience this fear yourself, or you're simply curious about the human mind, I promise you'll come away with fascinating insights. What is bathophobia? Bathophobia comes from the Greek words bathos, meaning depth, and phobos, meaning fear. It's specifically the fear of depth, particularly deep bodies of water like oceans, lakes, and even swimming pools. This differs from aquaphobia, fear of water in general, because bathophobes might be perfectly comfortable with shallow water, bathtubs, or even swimming in areas where they can see the bottom clearly. What makes bathophobia particularly interesting is that it connects to something deeply ingrained in our evolutionary psychology. Our ancient ancestors had legitimate reasons to fear deep, unknown waters. They were dangerous, unpredictable environments filled with potential predators. In many ways, this fear served as a protective mechanism. Sarah's story, When the Deep Calls. Let me tell you about Sarah from Portland, Oregon. Sarah grew up near the Pacific coast and loved playing in the shallow waters as a child. But everything changed during a family vacation to Hawaii when she was 12. We were on a boat tour and the guide mentioned we were over a trench that was thousands of feet deep, Sarah recalls. Something about knowing there was so much empty space beneath me, so much unknown, triggered something primal in me. I had my first panic attack right there on that boat. For years afterward, Sarah couldn't even look at pictures of deep ocean water without feeling dizzy and anxious. Swimming pools with deep ends became off limits. Even lakes made her uncomfortable if she couldn't clearly see the bottom. The worst part was how people didn't understand, she explains. They'd say things like, "Just don't look down," or "Nothing's going to get you." But it wasn't about logic. It was this overwhelming feeling of vulnerability and smallness. Sarah's experience highlights something important about bathophobia. It's often not about drowning or sea creatures. It's about the psychological impact of vast, unknown spaces and our mind's tendency to fill that unknown with danger. The psychology behind bathophobia. So what's actually happening in the brain of someone with bathophobia? When a bathophobe confronts deep water, their amygdala, the brain's fear center, activates a fight-or-flight response. This triggers a cascade of physiological reactions: increased heart rate, rapid breathing, sweating, and intense feelings of dread. But why does deep water specifically trigger this response? Psychologists point to several factors. 1. Evolutionary programming. As land-dwelling mammals, humans aren't naturally equipped for deep water environments. Our ancestors who were cautious around deep water were more likely to survive. 2. Fear of the unknown. Deep water represents one of the most literal examples of what lies beneath. We literally cannot see what's down there, and our imagination fills in the gaps, often with threatening scenarios. 3. Loss of control. In deep water, we're at the mercy of an environment we can't fully control or escape easily. 4. Past trauma. For many, like Michael from Chicago, bathophobia developed after a frightening experience. Michael was fishing with his father on Lake Michigan when he was 10. "I leaned too far over the edge of the boat and fell in," he tells us. "The water was so dark and cold, and I couldn't touch the bottom. I remember looking down and seeing nothing but blackness stretching forever. My dad pulled me out quickly, but that feeling of suspension over an endless void, I've never forgotten it." The cultural dimension. Interestingly, our fear of deep water has permeated our culture in profound ways. Think about how often deep water serves as a setting for horror in our stories and films. From Jaws to the Abyss, to countless sea monster legends, we've used deep water as a canvas for our collective fears for centuries. In Washington state, Lake Crescent has its own monster legend, Cressy, despite being a relatively peaceful lake. Local resident Amanda explains, "Growing up here, we all heard stories about Cressy. The lake is over 600 feet deep in some places, and the water is so clear until you get deeper, then it turns this eerie blue-black. Even knowing the monster stories are just myths, something about looking down into that darkness still gives me chills." These cultural narratives both reflect and reinforce our innate uneasiness with deep water, creating a feedback loop that can intensify bathophobia for those already predisposed to it, when fear becomes limiting. For some people, bathophobia is a mild discomfort easily avoided. For others, it becomes seriously limiting. Take Jason from Florida, surrounded by water but unable to enjoy it. "I live in a coastal paradise, but I can't go on boats with my friends. I can't go to the beach unless I stay in the shallows. I miss my cousin's wedding because it was on a cruise ship," he shares. "People think I'm being dramatic, but the panic is real. My heart races, I can't breathe, I get dizzy. It's not something I can just get over." Jason's experience is common among those with severe bathophobia. The fear can lead to avoiding vacations or social activities involving water, panic attacks when unexpectedly confronted with deep water, nightmares about deep water scenarios, development of associated fears like fear of fish or boats, embarrassment and social isolation, the science of depth perception in water. Part of what makes deep water so disorienting is how it affects our perception. Water distorts light, making depth perception challenging. Objects appear closer or further than they actually are. Colors shift and fade with depth. These visual distortions can trigger vertigo-like symptoms, even in people without bathophobia. Dr. Eleanor Winters, a marine psychologist from the University of California, explains, "Water creates a unique sensory environment that humans aren't fully adapted to process. The way light behaves underwater, refracting, scattering, being absorbed, creates visual cues that conflict with our land-based perceptual systems. This sensory confusion can trigger anxiety, even in experienced divers." This science helps explain why even people who aren't typically afraid of water might feel uneasy looking down into great depths. It's not just psychological, it's also about how our brains process these unusual visual inputs. Overcoming bathophobia. Paths to freedom. The good news is that bathophobia, like most phobias, can be effectively treated. Here are some approaches that have helped many people reclaim their relationship with water. 1. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. CBT is considered the gold standard for treating specific phobias. It works by identifying and challenging irrational thoughts associated with deep water and gradually changing behavioral responses. Emily from Texas shares, "My therapist helped me identify my catastrophic thinking patterns. I was always imagining worst-case scenarios, being pulled down by currents, encountering dangerous creatures, or just the panic of being suspended over nothingness. Through CBT, I learned to challenge these thoughts and replace them with more realistic assessments." 2. Exposure therapy. This involves gradually and systematically exposing yourself to deep water in controlled environments, starting with the least frightening scenarios and working up to more challenging ones. A typical exposure hierarchy might look like looking at pictures of deep water, watching videos of deep water, standing at the edge of a pool's deep end, putting feet in the deep end while sitting on the edge, standing in chest-deep water while looking at the deep end, gradually moving into deeper water with support. Robert from Arizona describes his experience. "We started with me just looking at a photo of the deep end of a pool for a few minutes each day. Eventually, I worked up to actually standing in the deep end while wearing a life jacket. Each step was terrifying at first, but got easier with repetition. Now I can swim in the deep end without panic, though I'm still working on open water." 3. Virtual reality therapy. One exciting development in phobia treatment is the use of virtual reality, which allows people to experience deep water scenarios in a completely safe environment. The VR program I use let me swim in increasingly deep virtual oceans, explains Danielle from New York. I could see the depth beneath me, but I knew I was actually sitting in my therapist's office. It helped bridge the gap between visualization exercises and actual exposure. Fourth, mindfulness and relaxation techniques. Learning to manage the physical symptoms of anxiety can help break the panic cycle that bathophobia triggers. Techniques include deep breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, mindfulness meditation, grounding techniques. I learned to focus on my breathing whenever I felt panic starting, says Mark from Colorado. By catching the physical symptoms early, the racing heart, the tight chest, I could sometimes prevent a full panic attack. It didn't cure my fear, but it made exposure therapy possible because I had tools to manage the anxiety. Success stories. Finding peace in the deep. Let's end with some inspiration from those who've overcome bathophobia. Lisa from California spent 20 years avoiding deep water after a frightening incident in her teens. I couldn't even look at the deep end of a pool without feeling sick, she recalls. Through a combination of therapy approaches and the support of patient friends, Lisa gradually reclaimed her life. Last summer, I went snorkeling in Hawaii. I was over water so deep I couldn't see the bottom, and I was okay. I even enjoyed it. That moment of floating peacefully over the deep blue, something I never thought I'd experience, was worth every difficult moment of therapy. Then there's David from Michigan, a former bathophobe who became a certified scuba diver. My therapist suggested I learn about what actually exists in deep water rather than letting my imagination run wild. Learning about marine ecosystems replaced my fear with fascination. Now I've dived in waters over 100 feet deep. Sometimes I still feel that initial spike of anxiety, but it passes because I've trained my brain to see wonder instead of danger. Practical tips for managing bathophobia. If you're dealing with this fear yourself, here are some practical steps you can take. 1. Educate yourself. Learn about the actual environments that exist in deep water. Knowledge can replace fearful fantasies with facts. 2. Start small. Don't begin by trying to jump off a boat into the ocean. Start with looking at images, then videos, then perhaps standing at the edge of a clear swimming pool. 3. Use safety aids. Life jackets, swim buddies, and other safety measures can provide security while you work through your fear. 4. Celebrate small victories. Overcoming phobias happens in small steps. Acknowledge and celebrate each bit of progress. 5. Seek professional help. A trained therapist can provide structured support in evidence-based techniques tailored to your specific situation. 6. Be patient with yourself. Phobias often develop instantly but take time to resolve. Don't be discouraged by setbacks. Conclusion. Bathophobia, the fear of deep water, connects to something fundamental in the human experience. It's about our relationship with the unknown, with spaces we can't fully see or control. It's about our evolutionary history and our psychological need for security and certainty. Whether you experience this fear yourself or are simply fascinated by the complexity of human psychology, understanding bathophobia offers valuable insights into how our minds process fear and how we can overcome even our most primal anxieties. If you're currently struggling with bathophobia, remember that you're not alone, and effective help is available. Many people have transformed their relationship with deep water from one of terror to one of respect, caution, and even wonder. Thank you for exploring the depths of bathophobia with me today. If you found this discussion valuable, please consider subscribing for more explorations of human fears and how we can understand and overcome them. Until next time, stay curious about your fears. They have much to teach us.